Hey there. Are you tired of waiting for the next episode of It's Probably Not Aliens? Well, we've got some good news for you. On Nebula, our streaming service, you can get access to all our episodes a week early. That's right, you'll never have to wait again to hear Scott and I debunk the latest ancient astronaut theory or get a movie fact wrong. But that's not all. Nebula is home to dozens of content creators we know you like, so you can find all your favorites in one place. Plus, we post content on there that you won't find anywhere else. And the best part? By signing up for Nebula at nebula.tv/probablyNotAliens, you're directly supporting the show and both of us. So don't wait any longer. Join Nebula today and listen to the next episode right after this one. Yeah, this is going to, what's interesting about this episode's topic specifically is that there's two How Move Big Rock theories, or three actually.
Okay.
Because like this one is like that they used sound to make anti-gravity.
Sure.
But then like there's also just that the aliens just did it for them using levitation rays or something. But then there's also the Gramcock theory that they just would get so high
extremely
that they could
high.
lift rocks with their mind.
That's true too. If this theory is about being able to construct something with sound, to move things with sound, do you think that we've built anything with our podcast? And I know, we've built a wonderful audience of space potatoes. Oh, I know, we've built a great community, blah, 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 blah. But I'm talking about, do you think we've ever built a physical thing with the power of our podcast, of two white guys doing a podcast?
Yeah. So I imagine to do that, you would need something like, we would need somebody who knows math to figure out like how much sound pressure we have created by taking the average decibels of an episode and multiplying it by the amount of listens that we've had, which I think is now north of 1 million. And
wow.
And then being like, if you were to multiply that much sound pressure by that, how much, if we were to play every single time this podcast has ever been played all at once in one place, how much force could we actually make?
How much could we do? Yeah.
Because my guess is that it actually wouldn't be very much.
That's true. While you were talking, I did mute myself and I sneezed a couple of times. And that's powerful sound is what a sneeze is. It's powerful. It's a sound so powerful that you lose control of your body momentarily.
Yeah. Lose control of your head, your neck, your bowels, everything.
Everything. It smells in here now, Tristan. But that's okay. I like to think I definitely think in the realm of podcasts, there are ones that are destructive, like Jericho. And then there are ones that are constructive, like what we'll be talking about today.
Jericho is a noticeably destructive podcast.
Jericho's the worst podcast.
Welcome to the Jericho experience.
Jericho. Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. I was trying to make a pun there. Oh, boy. But this is a good podcast that builds things. This is a podcast called It's Probably Not Aliens, where we look at ancient astronaut theory, the TV show Ancient Aliens, and we look at their claims while teaching you some real history and sometimes science, and just about these very interesting cultures and people and places from the past, and making jokes along the way. My name is Scott Nicewander. I know nothing. My job on this show is to watch Ancient Aliens and basically to try and refute any of the actual good learning that Tristan is going to do to all of us. And I'm here to have my mind changed. I'm here thinking, Sonic the Hedgehog. He's going to move some stones. I think that's what we're talking about.
My name is Tristan Johnson, and I realize that probably the way that our podcast has actually used sound to build anything is that there's probably a non-zero amount of people who were listening to this podcast while either working in construction or doing a DIY project, and that
that's good.
they were having a shitty enough day that the podcast was enough to get them through the day where they otherwise might have faked sick and gone home early.
That's better than what I was thinking, which is that since our podcast is stored online, we are contributing to the building of more server farms, which is maybe less good than what you're saying. But yeah.
There you go. So yeah, today's episode is sort of the ultimate How Move Big Rock episode, because
the ultimate.
Yeah, last week we talked about Jericho, and we talked about how sound weapons. We're talking about this in a weird way because we're kind of recording out of order at this point, but
they don't know that. They don't have to know that, Tristan.
But theoretically, you will know that like the idea of sound being used to destroy things was like part of that. And then right after on the show, they kind of go into, but also what if sound could be used to build? What if sound could move big rock? Maybe that's their final way of being like, how move big rock? Sound.
How move big rock. You ever watch that Cartoon Network show back in the day with Andrew WK called Destroy, Build, Destroy?
Never heard of this in my life.
Yeah, it wasn't very popular. It was a live action Cartoon Network show.
That sounds like weird.
Yeah, they had a block of live action Cartoon Network shows for a bit. It was bad. Anyway, we're doing Destroy, Build, Destroy today. Can sound destroy? Can it build? Can it also destroy once again? We're not actually doing that part, but destroy, build, destroy. With sound. That's what we're doing.
Yeah.
I don't want to explain the show. It's going to be too complicated to
Destroy, build, destroy does sound like the life structure or the life, like the process of making a meal, because you start off by chopping stuff up and then you make a meal and then you eat it.
You build it and then you eat it. Destroy, build, destroy. That's true.
So let's look at a couple of the examples that these people have who are pointing to in this episode.
Please do.
Have you ever heard of Mycenae, the ancient Greek city that is made of stone walls and has like a famous lion gate?
I have not heard of that.
I hadn't either until I seen this, but I gave you a little snapperoonie.
Oh, you did do this. I've been enjoying you doing this, giving me little drop down images so I can react in real time. I've not seen this image yet, so I'm going to click the drop down arrow. Boom. As it loads. Oh.
Those look like some reasonably large rocks, I guess.
Those are pretty large rocks. When you said it had a lion, I thought it was going to look like a lion. Maybe it does if I zoom in.
No, but if you look at the archway, you can see it looks like there's like a stone lions over top of the archway, kind of.
Oh, I see. Yeah. For sure. Yeah, this is just like a big stone walls, big stone archways.
And so, like, how could people have ever figured out to move a stone that heavy and put it on top of another stone? We have never seen it.
This is something they talk about this in the show. And if you're listening to us, I've been doing my due diligence in watching Ancient Aliens and hearing what they've talked about. And maybe I'm going to play this too early. You can tell me. But here is a clip of Georgios Tsoukalos, famous Aliens meme guy, talking about this specific stone, the big stone over the doorway of the door.
Nice.
All right.
Now, we would have difficulties today moving that stuff around. Now, I'm not saying that we today cannot do it. I'm not saying that. But if we're struggling with our modern technology, is it really logical to suggest that our ancestors did this with pivots and with little ropes and with wooden rollers?
I mean, the man's got a point, Tristan. We're struggling. We're struggling today to move big rocks.
Yeah, don't look at
How could they do it?
Don't look at that crane in Germany that's like the size of a skyscraper that they use for moving coal or something.
But do you know, that crane is struggling. Talk to that crane's wife and kids. It's struggling.
Oh, it's struggling emotionally.
Yeah, it's hard.
It's emotionally taxing to move big rocks.
That job does not have health insurance for therapy.
What are you talking about? He's German, so I mean, it probably has like great benefits and probably has a generous vacation time. And
that's true. Foiled again.
That crane probably has a master's degree in engineering that they got for free because I can tell you. I don't know.
Yeah,
if
I get it. America's whole system is bad. I get it, Mr. Canada.
No, I mean, like, what's it called? It's like Germany's got stuff that's good in ways that even like that Canada doesn't do well. Like, for example, Germany just very recently passed a law where you can. So, like, most European countries have like a claim system where you can usually do some sort of claim of citizenship of the country if you have like a grandparent that is from that country or it came from that country. And we were looking into it, and Germany recently passed a law where you can go to great grandparents.
Ooh.
And so, as we learned that, one, my dad's grandmother, British, but my mom's great grandfather, German. So now we're
I'm doing some really challenging mental math in my head to be like, are we going to have to worry about that distant German relative from the past?
No,
what are they up to?
No. What's it called? He moved to Canada before World War II.
Okay.
Yeah, like that's the thing is I have some German family, but they mostly moved to Canada. Like my great grandmother immigrated to Canada after her father died in the Franco-Prussian War. So I think we're good.
I think you're okay.
Yeah. But like the idea though is that like we're doing this because like my mom is now exploring trying to get German citizenship so that I can get German citizenship, so that I can give my son German citizenship, so that he can go to university without having to pay money.
Nice.
Which I feel like is there's probably some like anti-immigration German guy being like, 9. But
no.
How dare they try to give their son a better life by going to my country? This is an insult. It's terrible. Apparently. But yeah, other things about building. The crane is fine. But like the pyramids, obviously. How move big rock? Baalbek.
How move big rock?
Yeah, Balbeck. Now, Balbeck is probably it's in Lebanon, and it's a ancient Roman temple complex there. We probably will be doing an episode on Balbeck at some point, because it's also a common ancient aliens thing. But it's one of those like common ancient aliens thing that, again, like the pyramids of Giza, comes down to how move big rock. But as you can see in the little image I provided.
Oh yeah, another picture from me. Yeah,
that Balbeck has some pretty big rock to move.
Pretty big rocks. Now, are the pillars rocks?
They are.
Okay. I have another fantastic soundbite for you. And I think it might be about Baalbek, but it's at least about one of these things. It's from the same episode. This clip, I guarantee you, is going to find a permanent spot on our soundboard.
Okay.
So here's the full clip, and I've also cut it down to be a part of our soundboard permanently.
And once you roll it with all these people, how do you move it?
So once you roll all the, so this guy was talking about, oh yeah, they can put logs under like the stones to roll it into place. But once you roll it, how do you move it? And so I've just cut down this little.
How do you move it?
How do you move it?
How do you move it?
How do you move it, Tristan?
That should be the name of Ancient Aliens. But yeah.
I love the idea of once you roll, like, yeah, you can move it, but then after you move it, how do you move it?
Once you quarry it, move it into place, put it in things, then you shape it, put it into the location it's supposed to be, and then you're finished constructing. How do you move it then?
How do you move it?
Yeah. How do you move it?
You got to like put that secret air horn mode that you put on so you can go do-do-do-do-do.
Oh yeah. Hold on. Let me see if I can do that really quickly. All right. Soundboard. How do you move it? Edit. It's not a toggle. It's a one shot. So I can be like,
how do you move it? How do you move it?
Yeah. Now it's going to turn into an EDM song. But you might remember that they talked about Baalbek at when we were in Kalamazoo. They mentioned this.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, when we saw Ancient Aliens live, that was a fun episode we did last year. Also one of the greatest experiences of my life, traveling to Chicago, meeting up with you in person, meeting up with a bunch of our fans at a Scooby-Doo themed, it was a Cartoon Network themed, but it was mostly Scooby-Doo themed bar. That was so fun.
It was a Cartoon Network themed bar that had not yet transitioned off of their Halloween promotion, which was making it Scooby-Doo themed.
Yeah, so we went in November, but it was still October themed.
Yeah.
It was that was so fun. I still think about that. We got to do it. We got to make this a once a year thing for us to meet up somewhere.
Next one, I want to if we can get the numbers, we should do like a poll or something like that. Because of the stuff we know about domestic markets and stuff like that, we should definitely do we should try to do a live show in Seattle.
I would love to do that. Yeah.
And because it's actually one of
I've only been to Seattle once, so I'd love to go again.
And it's one of the 5 states I have not been to. So if I can knock Washington off of my list, that'd be pretty cool.
Do it.
But then I would be in the awkward situation of being like, if I want to get all the states finished, I have to go to Oregon, but not Washington.
All right. But I haven't even described Baalbek for people who don't know. I don't really know what this place is. It's an ancient Roman temple. It just looks like a big stone, building, or like what you would consider to be like an ancient stone structure with these big pillars and things like that.
The picture doesn't do it justice very well, but it is a phenomenally big structure. Like those rocks are very big.
Wait, the rocks are big.
How do you move it?
Oh boy. Okay. It's
going to get a lot of play here on this podcast.
So the idea is that they're big. The scale is huge. Some of these rocks weigh hundreds of tons and moved with a lot of precision.
Yeah, there was in the episode they talked about one of the rocks at least weighs 1,000 tons. That's like 2 million pounds. Yeah, it's wild.
Well, is a ton? I thought a ton is. Oh yeah, I guess it would be a million because 1,000 is a million, isn't it? Okay.
Yeah.
So that's the things are heavy rocks.
They're heavy, and we're struggling. Even with our modern technology, we're struggling.
Even with our modern psychotherapy, we're still emotionally struggling to get these rocks in place.
Even with the best German technology, we're struggling.
These rocks are also precisely cut, placed together. And so Ancient Aliens has come in with a solution, which is that...
Oh, cool. Tell me.
These stones were moved using advanced technology with something that they called anti-gravity acoustic levitation.
Okay, because we've talked about anti-gravity before.
Yeah, and we'll talk about it again today, too.
We'll talk about it again today, but this is kind of different because it's acoustic levitation. So this is using sound.
Yeah.
All right. Tell me more about this.
Well, they met a guy who was able to make an engineer who used sound to make a drop of water hover. And then in said clip, he mentions that you really couldn't lift anything heavier than a drop of water with just acoustics. You would need some sort of anti-gravity. And then they pivoted into the anti-gravity part.
Yep. So this is the thing that really made me laugh. Yeah. They met this physicist, and this physicist in the episode starts showing off this machine that can use sound to levitate this very light, like basically styrofoam ball, right? Tiny styrofoam ball can levitate. I assume it's styrofoam. It looked like styrofoam. And he even says, it's very light. And this physicist talks about how sound waves, if you're going to use sound waves to move an object, it can really only be useful for precise adjustments, like tiny adjustments. But if you want to move something big, he just sort of blankly says then you need anti-gravity, which is a different thing entirely.
Yeah, it was a very funny moment. And I just loved
extremely funny. And then the show continues to talk.
And to turn it to sort of Uno reverse on these, on Ancient Aliens, even with modern technology, we're struggling to move styrofoam balls with acoustics.
Yeah. But they still, so even after he ends his sort of spiel with and then after, even if we wanted to move these big things, you would need not sound, but anti-gravity. Then the show continues to be but anyway, the power of sound waves. And it's no, that's the opposite of what this guy is saying.
Can you let him finish his sentence? Because he probably was anti-gravity, which is a thing that doesn't exist.
Yeah, basically. He was if you wanted to do this, then what you're talking about is anti-gravity. And in the Ancient Aliens editor mind, it's boom, we got him. He said anti-gravity.
I think he actually, I don't even think he said anti-gravity. If I remember correctly, it was something more.
No, he did.
Oh, I thought it was around the lines of you would need something that counteracts the force of gravity.
No, he said anti-gravity. Okay. He's if you wanted to do it in the way that you're describing, then what you're talking about is anti-gravity. But he didn't say that, I don't know this physicist, so I don't know what his leanings are for Ancient Aliens, but it's very possible. I mean, this is the start of the show. This is season 2. It's very possible that he was on this History Channel show thinking, yeah, I get to talk about cool physics stuff. And then as soon as he mentioned anti-gravity, the Ancient Aliens producers are like, we got him. We got a physicist to say anti-gravity. Let's go.
Yeah, I imagine that as we move forward, the amount of like credible experts who are willing to go on Ancient Aliens that are not just like Michio Kaku who says yes to everything are going to get lower. So yeah, the idea is that this technology was given to ancient civilizations by extraterrestrials that went to Earth in the distant past, shared this technology. They used it to build all these things, and then they just never made them again, and no evidence of this technology was ever left behind. And we never saw any power sources for how they got all this stuff. It just like, it existed, then it was gone, and that's it. That's it. Easy claim.
Easy claim. I didn't even hit the claim button. That's how easy it was. We'll do it here because I keep forgetting to do it. That was the claim. Ooh. Exciting.
Yeah. So that's that. I feel like I couldn't even get through saying what their claim is without being snarky. So, but yeah, to get like a little bit is that their claim is that acoustic levitation or anti-gravity or something, they're not clear in the show itself.
Okay.
Was using sound waves theoretically to lift and move colossal stones, even though the guy was like, nah.
Nah.
The idea is based under the idea that sound waves, under certain conditions, can actually exert enough force to counteract gravity and levitate objects. And then there's just this line from the episode that says, there are certain types of low rumbles and signals that will affect a person. They make you feel sick.
Okay.
And I was like, okay, so there's a few steps between using psychoacoustics to make somebody feel sick and lifting like 1 million pound stones with...
I wish I had thought of this ahead of time, but we're gonna do another episode that in this season that'll reference a MythBusters claim. The MythBusters also did this sort of thing, where like testing out sound waves to see if it'll affect the human body. And I'm sure there's basically infinite sound waves, effectively, like different variations of whatnot. But like
Cranks got
I'm pretty sure that.
Cranks got very into the concept of resonant frequency, and they they just use it for everything.
They sure do.
Which is for anybody.
I'm pretty sure it was busted.
Yeah. I think that was an episode where they tested the brown noise or something like that.
The brown note was specifically what it was.
Yeah, which is like technically supposed to be a frequency that makes your bowels resonates with your bowels.
Makes you evacuate your bowels. Yeah. Yes. I'm sure there are frequencies that affect the human body in some way or another. Some of them can give you a headache for sure. You know what I mean? But some of this takes it a little too far.
Oh, sound waves can have a profound effect on the human body.
I figured as much. Yeah.
Like what's it called? Like we know for a fact that like certain sounds can make you go deaf. But even like in more subtle ways, like one of those really cool bits of studies shows that one of the common things that makes, like I took a psychoacoustics class where we talked about this, where like oftentimes like places that we think are haunted, it's because of this presence of something called infrasound, which shows up in a lot of older buildings, especially like castles and stuff like that, where it's this note that's too low for the human ear to register, but people in rooms where they're playing the sound report having this feeling like you're in like there's like an eerie presence and stuff, like it gives you the heebie-jeebies.
Oh, fascinating.
Yeah, and they think that this infrasound might be like an example, like might come from things like drafty, like kind of stuff that comes from buildings as they age. And so that might be like what associates like old houses and castles and stuff like that with ghost stories, is that the infrasound from like the wind interacting with like these things might be like making it so that the house has this weird sound that has this like sound that you can't hear but makes you feel like there's a presence.
Yeah. And, this makes me think about another soundbite from the episode. They're talking about acoustics. They're talking to a physicist. But are those even the same thing? Physics? Is acoustics physics? Well, let's see what they have to say.
For ancient astronaut theorists, the key might be found not by studying the laws of physics, but by exploring the interdisciplinary science of acoustics.
So I guess that's acoustics and physics are different. That was my sort of takeaway. Acoustics aren't physics, so it's a different thing.
Okay, I will come to the defense of Ancient Aliens on this, because what they're trying to do, and they're not explaining it well, is that academia is full of like these like interdisciplinary fields that have people from various different things. And so I could guess that there is definitely a field of acoustics, which is like physicists and psychologists and like people who study sound in an interdisciplinary fashion that like come from various different walks of life and have like maybe like a journal or something, or have some conferences together. I did my master's in American study.
But then they also do immediately talk to the only person about this who is labeled as a physicist. So that also threw me off.
Yeah. I'm just guessing that that's like what they were going with, because I know that like I, for example, was doing my PhD in memory studies, which is not just it'd be like, we don't just need to go to the field of psychology, but go to the field of memory studies, where you can study memory in like a social context and historical and like blah, 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 instead of just studying it like as a psychological phenomenon. I'm thinking that's what they're going with. So,
all right. Well, fair enough. All right. So we're talking about acoustics, moving these big rocks.
Yeah.
Moving these big stones. I mean, I gotta believe them.
Yeah, there's even a line in the episode where they were like, there are many ancient legends which suggest that some of the monuments were built with the help of acoustic levitation.
I have a fantastic soundbite for that.
Okay.
And I want to play it after we do some product and service.
Yeah, love products.
Sounds good. All right. So let's talk about, let's carry on. I have this great soundbite, but I want to hear you sort of talk about these legends, these monuments, all these big rocks. I mean, we've got this question.
How do you move it?
Yeah.
What are we going to do? How do you possibly answer that? If the answer isn't anti-gravity or sound waves or getting so high you can move things with your mind, what is the answer? And what are these legends all about?
Well, basically, they point to a handful of legends that talk about building some of the larger constructions using magic. Like, for example, the big one is Merlin the wizard, who the legends say built Stonehenge with magic, using a magic rod that puts the rocks into place. Which they were they moved as much as 200 miles, and they were like, you could see like in these stories you hear that they were chanting, and that you were that spells require saying certain words, and so you were maybe singing the vibrations that you would need.
The vibrations, you're blowing horns, the crowd's chanting. It's all about these big sonic environments that are moving these that are happening while these things are being built. So is there a correlation there? Is there a causation there? I don't know.
I do love the idea that they were basically trying to imply that Merlin's magic wand was like some kind of like bullhorn or like megahorn.
Yeah. They were like, it's some sort of sound amplifier weapon.
Yeah.
It's just like Merlin just speaking into a megaphone. Move. Abracadabra.
Yeah, exactly.
I've got an echo thing for it. Abracadabra.
Perfect.
That's what Merlin would say. Oh, I gotta turn it off.
Another example that wasn't really talked about in the episode, it was just sort of alluded to, was the Arab historian al-Masudi, who basically like hundreds or even thousands of years after the making of the pyramids, talked about the Egyptians using records that he could find, and found that, according to his account, there was a papyrus that had a magic spell on it that would be placed underneath the stones, and then when struck with a rod, the stone would levitate and move along a path.
There's also, they didn't talk about this in the show either, but there's also the historical document of, oh shoot, why can't I think of it? No, hold on. This was going to be a good joke. There's also the historical document of Outlander, the sexy TV show, where the lady travels through time by touching a big rock and she feels like vibrations through it. And so that is like magic. Magic is vibrations, and it allows her to travel through time. So that's how that works.
time travel, building things. What can't vibes do?
It's all vibrations.
Yeah.
If I've learned anything from The Flash, the comic book superhero, it's that speed is vibration. Vibration can do anything from traveling through different dimensions and traveling through time. It's all vibrations.
Yep. So when I looked into this, I did find out that al-Malsudi actually is like a renowned Arab historian and a geographer who like traveled around. He's sometimes referred to as the Herodotus of the Arabs. And had this sort of was an explorer and learned a bunch of stuff about the world. And so his account of the building of the pyramids, where he claimed that this was the way that they built it, which was using magic. And then that moved into the whole idea of it being that kind of that being the argument. A more recent one is actually
sort of evolved from there. Yeah.
Even a more recent example is Coral Castle in Florida, which was built by a guy named Edward.
Florida.
Which is a castle built with like lots of heavy stones that was built by a guy named Edward Lieskalnen, which happened like in the early 20th century and is claimed to have been used. He claims that he used a perpetual motion holder to construct the castle. And so some speculated that he had like studied the ancients and made some like acoustic levitation technology that then nobody could replicate or find evidence of and used it to place the stones into place.
Gotcha.
Because he built
this is the first time hearing of this Coral Castle in Florida.
I have a picture for you.
Florida's a part of the United States. Oh, you do have a picture for me. I was about to look it up. Let me see. It's less of a castle than I would assume, unless it's just the scale is off. Unless this person sitting on this stone is like a giant.
This person is on top of it, I think. But
he's on top of it. Okay.
Yeah. Lieskalnen claimed that he understood the laws of weight and leverage and knew the secrets of the people who built the pyramids and did a lot of his work at night and in secret. So a lot of people thought that he had special techniques that he was using. And he mentioned having the perpetual motion holder. And so over the years, people suggest that he had supernatural powers or that he could psychically levitate things or that he had knowledge of earth energies or magnetism or whatever thing they really want to use to like build stuff. But that if you really look at the evidence, he used things like picks, winches, ropes, pulleys. There are photos and tools in the museum nearby that show that he had built like large tripods and pulleys and winches that he used to move the blocks. And that it was built out of oolite limestone, which is apparently a much lighter stone than it looks.
Well, simple machines, I think, are pretty magical. This castle, we've not described it. It looks really cool. It's very space themed. It's got like a crescent moon, what looks like a planet with a ring around it. I don't know if it's specifically like a Saturn or anything like that. But it's very space oriented, built out of this limestone, you said?
Yeah.
It looks really cool. I've never heard of this. This is awesome.
There you go. If you ever find a thing in Florida you want to see, but also don't go to Florida if you're on vacation because evil. But
it's got a lot of bad stuff going on there.
Yeah.
In that Florida. I don't want to make fun of Floridians as the people, but boy, some of the stuff that your state in general is doing. Ooh.
Yeah. So don't give money to anybody. Like don't I don't know, just don't go on vacation.
Don't give money to anybody. Hoard your money.
Hoard your money.
That's a life lesson.
Buy gold.
Buy gold.
We're gonna do an ad
Hide
for
it under
gold.
the floorboards.
But because you know that when society collapses, the one thing when people are struggling to feed themselves and have water, the thing that they're going to think is valuable is gold, the
Shiny rock.
famously edible and drinkable metal. But
it's edible. It doesn't provide substance or sustenance in any capacity,
I guess there's
but you can't eat it.
There's like weird assholes on the internet who put it on ice cream or something like that to be like, I bought $700 ice cream, and it's just like a decent thing of ice cream, and then they just put literal gold on it to make it worth more money.
It's the gold, but it's so cheap though. I don't know why they got gold foil is pretty inexpensive. I don't know why they're charged. It just looks shiny and anyway. We can't get into it.
Another story that also is used as an example is that a person by the name of Dr. Jarl, who went and wrote a book called The Tales from the Far East. So very credible. A European guy writing a book called Tales from the Far East included a story of Tibetan monks being able to levitate stones using musical instruments and chanting.
Gotcha.
But then he did apparently take pictures of this and made and video, but then had this was confiscated by somebody.
Oh no, but he had all the evidence.
So all he could really hand over was his drawings and his claim that this totally happened.
Oh man, I hate when that happens.
I know.
Oh, I'm seeing now here, this is where you wanted the ad break. I misread Act I misread Act 2 as ad break in my head.
It's all good. It's all good. We were at the half-hour mark anyway. So here's the main thing about all of this stuff. Let's first talk about the idea of anti-gravity. So first of all, we talked about this before, but anti-gravity is a firmly rejected technology. You can't really reverse a fundamental aspect of matter in the universe.
No, you can't really undo it. Is it one of those things, I wonder if you know the answer to this, when we've had episodes with Isaac Arthur on, is it one of those things that works on paper but it doesn't work in real life? Or is it just not even a thing that people consider because it's ridiculous?
There's a thing where you could call something anti-gravity if you could make in many ways anti-gravity is just a force that would overcome the power of gravity. So that's literally all force.
So it's not really a specific.
So either you're describing just the concept of a thing being able to lift, or you are making up a technology that just undoes a innate property of the universe.
Gotcha.
But the thing, there's a lot of anti-gravity technology is right up there with perpetual motion or free energy is one of those things that just doesn't make any sense and has no practical application. And as you mentioned, acoustic levitation is a real phenomenon and has been used to levitate things like little particles of styrofoam or drops of water. But there's a big issue with scaling up this technology to move big rock.
Need bigger sound.
Yeah, and I think here's the problem, and this is the big that comes for it, is that there's a increasing amount of energy needed to produce the sound to levitate something.
Okay.
And the energy that you'd be putting into the air, the more that you do that, the more that you are going to be increasing things like kinetic power and heat. So there's this weird thing where you're if you, at the end of the day, you need to know that sound is a pressure wave.
Yeah, I was going to say, we haven't really talked about that in this episode yet, but if people, I assume most people know this, but you never know. Yeah, sound is just a pressure wave through the air, specifically. Yeah.
Specifically, yeah. So it's if you were to think of, I'm trying to think of if you were to think of dropping a rock in water and seeing the sort of ripples out there, it's like doing that, but in the air. So there's periods, it's basically intermittent periods of less dense and more dense air. Yeah. And so
so you've got that philosophical question: if a tree falls in the woods and no one's around to hear it, does it make a sound? My answer to that has always been, because I'm pedantic, if a tree falls in the woods and no one's around to hear it, does it make a sound? If no one's around to perceive the air pressure waves, then it's not sound. It's just air pressure waves. I think sound is when someone or something is around to perceive the air pressure waves as sound. Otherwise, it's just air pressure, right? That's my pedantic answer to it.
Sure.
Suck it. Everyone yell at me that I'm going through that. That's my final answer.
Fair. The main problem that I notice very quickly is that when you start scaling up the energy that you're using to do something like acoustic levitation, you start running into the problem of basically nuking and pulverizing whatever it is that you're actually going to be moving. And so if you were to scale up this technology to the point where you could lift a rock, you would basically need so much energy that at that point you would be destroying the rock and probably setting it on fire.
But if you destroyed it, it might move.
Yeah, there is that.
It might move. It might break off into lots of little bits and move all and scatter. So
yeah, so this is
job done.
Yeah, and this is the thing that we're going to talk about last week, which is a funny sentence to say. But but yeah, the technique of the other thing is that the amount of energy needed would make using this technique to lift rocks entirely unpractical, because the amount of energy that you would need would then get you to the point where it would be a dangerous technology to even use, because for example, the reason why people who work on airports, on runways and stuff like that, have to wear protective ear stuff. Or people construction workers have to have ear protection when they're on a site.
Or if you go to any live concert, please wear ear protection.
There you go. Yeah, is that even a reasonably common amount of air pressure energy created by sound will cause hearing damage. And that's just what you need. Like, that's just the sound of like planes taking off or loud music or jackhammers. When you're looking at like the amount of energy that would be needed to create a sound wave that could move a like 1 million pound stone, you're talking about like amounts of decibel levels, which is decibel is just the term for like measuring the energy of a sound wave. You're talking about decibel levels that could kill a person, because I will say anything that can move a rock is going to do some serious damage to flesh and bone.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about the airplanes. Think about how loud airplanes are, and they create that amount of volume, that amount of sound, that scale of sound, while also being a physical object that moves people. If you remove the physical object that moves people through the sky and just want to create it with the sound, it would have to be, I assume, much louder.
Yeah, like for example,
and kill people.
Yeah, like for example, I'm just putting it here. So you will start experiencing like uncomfortably loud, like uncomfortably painful sound at about 120 decibels.
Okay.
And keep in mind that this is a logarithmic amount of energy, so that the higher decibels you go, it gets like exponentially more powerful.
Yeah, that's the other thing too. Yeah, decibels are like if you go one up in a decibel, it's like twice as much as the previous one.
Exactly.
So like 1 decibel, 2 decibels is twice as loud as 1 decibel. 3 decibels is twice as loud as 2 decibels. I believe that's how it goes.
Yeah, at about 150 decibels. Keep in mind, like 150 decibels is like the sound, like a balloon popping amount of like loudness. 140 is like a jet engine. Once you get to 150 at like a constant rate, you are going to a human being will not be able to stand being in that situation. It will be like actively painful. Then once you get above 190 decibels, you are at what's called the loudest possible true sound, where the ear can't actually perceive it anymore, because if you perceive anything louder than that, your eardrums are basically going to like
they'll burst.
Right?
Yeah.
200 decibels, the sound starts like moving your organs, and you're getting to the point where you're dealing with
moving.
Like lethal.
You said moving.
Yeah.
You said moving. So could work.
180 decibels is like a rocket taking off. Once you get to like 200 decibels, like it is, you're experiencing sound that will cause like organ failure and stuff like that. So
hold on now, Tristan. Yeah. If I experienced that, if it was moving my organs around and I had a kidney stone, could you not say that sound moved a stone?
Yep. Actually, I do think there is, now don't quote me on this, I feel like this will be like a corrections thing, but I do think there actually is a form of therapy used on kidney stones where they use sound waves to break up the kidney stones.
To break it up? That is actually a good idea, potentially. I actually have no idea. It sounds fun.
It's a non-invasive way to break up a kidney stone, which would make for it being a less painful experience.
Hey, look, Google autofill definitely came up for me. I said use sound to break, and then it said up kidney stones.
Yeah, and like
lithotripsy treats kidney stones by sending focused ultrasonic energy or shock waves directly to the stone first located with a fluoroscopy.
Actually, before the show, the
shockwaves will break up the shockwaves will break a large stone into smaller stones that will pass through the urinary system. Cool.
Yeah.
Medicine.
And so I'm just trying to see if I'm trying to find like an actual thing that an actual thing that emits 200 decibels where you're getting to like that things, and I'm struggling. It seems like let's see. Yeah, 200 decibels is, you're at the point where like, a human body can't actually endure that. So you can imagine that would probably not work for...
A sperm whale's click is 200 decibels.
Okay. There you go. But basically what I'm saying is that like, you can't really, direct sound. Like it goes off in all directions, right? So like to use even people who use like sonic weapons have to have ear protection on. So like you can kind of point it, but at the end of the day, like it would be a like prohibitively dangerous way to move things. And in many cases, as we know, it'd be way easier to just use ropes and pulleys than to like have to leverage so much and just like waste that much energy to move things. Like,
yeah. Yeah, but if we have free energy,
Well, there you go. Yeah.
it all connects. If we have free energy and anti-gravity, then pretty much all these problems are solved. I don't know what you're complaining about.
There you go. Yeah, so like the thing though is that like there are other techniques that might be safer than using like organ liquefying amounts of energy to make organ liquefyingly loud sounds.
Yeah.
Because 200 decibels is just where the human body can't tolerate it anymore. You still need way more than that to even consider the idea of like levitating rocks. And I think the amount of energy that you would need to break rocks is probably lower than the amount to lift them. But yeah, so like the thing is that we don't need those because we have a fairly well-established like body of study to show that we do know how many of these big rocks were moved, and that the tools and techniques have been around and were used back then and are used today where we don't struggle to move big rocks. And I don't understand, like there are rocks of like Egyptian fancy type size. The only reason that we don't do it as much anymore is that we figured out concrete, and concrete is a way easier way to make big rock beds and stuff like that they don't have to do in the past.
Yeah.
So now you only really do it if you want something fancy.
Because you don't have to find big rocks and then stack them up. And, you know, with our modern technology, we're struggling, Tristan. So the concrete helps. You can pour it. You can make it whatever size you want. It's great. It's liquid at first. Yeah.
But like the Egyptians, for example, used copper chisels, bronze saws, wooden rollers, sleds, ramps, and they were able to cut, transport, and position massive limestone blocks that, for example, could be used to do the pyramids. And like we have a lot of like we know all these things because not only have we found a lot of evidence and like tool marks shown on the rocks that were put in the place. Like you can see the chisel marks on the rocks that were used to build the pyramids. But furthermore, experimental archaeologists have been able to move these rocks and do all of these exact same things using the exact same techniques that the ancient Egyptians had.
Yeah, but all right, look, I'm willing to concede that you could take the rocks and like put them on things to roll them. But once you get there,
How do you move it?
how do you move it?
It's funny that it kind of sounds like Joe Biden.
It does a little bit. How do you move it?
And keep in mind that like we have like a lot of evidence because of stuff like how copper is a fairly soft metal. So the chisels had to be resharpened constantly. So we have lots of evidence of like not only like hammering and annealing the metal to restore its edge. So there's like lots of like, you know, random scraps of copper around where they had to constantly be reshaping these things. There's like, yeah, again, like there's partially quarried stone that they just didn't finish moving. There's like there's just so much like detritus lying around that shows plenty of evidence of them being able to use these simple machines to carve and move stones, but none that shows that they had the absurd amounts of energy or like the technology that existed to hover the rocks that just like disappeared. So for some reason, chisels can survive the test of time, but not these like levitation devices.
Yeah, that can move things with sound. In case you were curious, by the way, I looked up what the loudest recorded sound on Earth was. It was the eruption of the Krakatoa volcano in 1883. Do you want to guess how many decibels it was?
I would probably say something in like 700 or 800.
Oh, not that much. It was 310.
Okay.
But again, we're talking decibels, which are that you know, every point up is twice as loud as the previous one. So 310 is a lot.
I believe like that was heard like kilometers away. Like
it's so much. If you were standing next to it when it happened, I mean, for a lot of reasons you would die, but for the sound alone also.
Yeah, and like even just like within a certain radius, just going deaf immediately. So like the other things too that are really important to mention is that they did use advanced technology to build all of these large things. These technologies are things like levers, an amazing way to move large loads using mechanical amplification. Like, you know, there's things like rollers, being able to reduce the friction of the earth on a heavy object by having it roll over a like line of circular objects. Ropes. If you think about it, taking like plant fiber or like animal tendons and then twisting them into a tight thing that has a lot of reinforcing strength by the fact that it's lots of little threads are used in many ways in these simple machines to withstand a fuckload of tension and being able to do these things.
Ropes are huge.
Yeah, and if you think about it, like you put it in a pulley, then like you can the amount of like you can kind of like, if you think about it this way, like the amount of energy you need to lift something is never going to change, but you can distribute it so that if you have a pulley, like you don't have to use all that energy all at once. You could have like one person, like if you had to pull up like 1,000 pounds, but you can only move 100 pounds at a time, then like the pulley lets you do it like 100 pounds at a time by like pulling it. And there's like, there's lots of evidence at these ancient sites of things like cranes, pulleys that were made of wood. And it shows like we have like lots of evidence about how they were able to move and shape and place these stones. They're impressive feats of technological engineering, and they are fascinating to study. But like there's nothing that actually requires anything that has like high technology. Like for example, the Egyptians had ramps made of mud, brick, and sand, and sleds or sledges that could be pulled by a team of workers to move stones. They also would do stuff like to reduce friction, put water down and use it as a lubricant to make things like if you just like wet. Anybody who's been on a water slide will know that you can use water, put it on a ramp to make it easier to move the stone up the thing. And then there's, of course, the ultimate form of using water to move things quickly, which is rivers.
Rivers!
A thing that Egypt was famously great at using to their advantage.
But it's desert. There's no water in desert.
Except for one place. and that place is where all of the Egyptians spent their time.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
And the other part, too, that's important to notice with these constructions is the power of time. We live in a period where construction is done as fast and as cheap as possible because of the realities of how construction and things get built.
Now, it doesn't feel like it.
Yeah.
If you live in a city, it doesn't feel like it because there's construction everywhere all the time that takes years. But taking years is still pretty quick compared to taking, I assume, hundreds of years.
Or decades at least.
Decades at least.
Like the pyramids of Giza were built while a pharaoh was alive who was pre-building his own tomb, which mean that they had decades. And they had, because of like, I think I mentioned this before, how like Egypt was like a weirdly like extremely authoritarian, like extremely centralized society. So like if they needed like 3,000 people to work, the government could just be like, all right, it's your time to go move big rock for a while. You'll be paid in beer and prestige. So like, get on over here, start moving rocks. Cause like the government was so central to basically like every part of daily life for the Egyptians. Like they basically had a centralized planned economy and like this like system of like, I think like some places it's called like a corvée system where people had to like, they had like a sort of labor tax where like you had to supply so much work per year on things like this. And so time and people and other things like lining up and alignments and stuff like that have more to do with the fact that they really understood astronomy, because we talked about how astronomy was like
we talked about that.
Really important for agricultural societies because the stars were used often for like the cycles of planting and harvesting and et cetera, et cetera.
Absolutely. I'm pretty sure also beer and prestige is also what the people who built the Bass Pro Shop that looks like a pyramid, that's what they were paid in as well, just beer and prestige.
I mean, that works. So like basically all of these claims have, there's like, the fact is they're basically coming with absolutely zero actual evidence to support their claim. They're just like sort of saying stuff. And so I found one of my favorite memes that I use over and over again that explains many things on this show. And I just wanted you to click on it and expose yourself to it. The TLDR.
Yeah, okay, yeah. TLDR, here we go. This is a picture of Dr. Manhattan from Watchmen, and this person who's below him saying source, and he says, I made it up. So that's the TLDR, is they made it up.
I think I make this joke later on in the season 2 where I'm gonna save that twist for later. But
okay.
Yeah, like they had like people like Egyptians had surveying tools. They had tools like the plumb bob and the square to be able to like align things, heavy things. The Egyptians notably, or the Greeks and Romans had advanced engineering skills that they then passed on, and like, you know, we are inheritors of that knowledge today. Like we don't like, for example, the construction of the Parthenon and the Colosseum, conspicuously not considered built by alien architecture, that are just as impressive as these other ones.
Interesting.
And
how did they move those rocks?
Yeah, how did they build the Parthenon? How did they build the Colosseum? Huh?
How do you move it? How do you move it?
Yeah.
Think about it.
And like they are very advanced civilizations. Like, for example, the Romans did have a form of concrete that could self-heal, that somehow used like volcanic ash and lime. And even today, we're still kind of trying to figure out how they did it as we're trying to build more durable concrete. But like, for example, like the quarryings of the ancient Egyptians with all the brass and chisels and stuff like that shows like a pretty good use of like local materials and stuff. The Inca had a famously known high skill for precise stone cutting techniques that they used to make things that also were claimed to be aliens, like Pumapunku. By like, well, those are a different South American nation, but like the sort of South American, I think part of Pumapunku. Anyways, there was definitely like a spreading of like advanced stone cutting techniques in South America that got used for a lot of things, because when you're trying to build in a mountain range where there's not a lot of trees, but there is a lot of rock, you get pretty good at cutting rocks to build stuff. And like, you just like use the materials around you. Like, for example, Roman concrete. Today, archaeologists figure all this stuff out by using experimental archaeology. So it's not just like we're speculating or making things up to cover up for the aliens. We've been able to use the exact same techniques that they used to do the exact same things that you would need to do to build these things. One example immediately that comes to mind is, and I really want to see this at some point, there's in France, there's this experimental archaeological project where they're building a castle.
Okay.
Using only tools from the era. The only things that they're doing different have to do more with like French laws around like worker safety and stuff, like French OSHA, Frosha. So, and also there's some other stuff too that like these are also they will always be like, how could a bunch of slaves build something so sophisticated like the pyramids?
Yes.
And then you learn very quickly that lots of archaeological evidence indicates that the workers who built the pyramids were not slaves. They were skilled laborers who were well fed, they were housed, and had respect for being experts in their craft. The Giza pyramids we found around.
See, I was going to ask about that. Because you were talking about the workers on the pyramids, and I had always heard that they were that slaves built the pyramids. And you talking about this it's very I don't know. It's not
there's
what I was taught. So
there's this weird ahistorical thing that comes up in a lot of like evangelical Christian spaces, but also some like hardcore fundamentalist like conservative Judaism circles, that like the pyramids were built by like the Hebrew slaves of Exodus, when like those timelines don't match up at all. And there's evidence, like there's way more evidence that that like around the Giza pyramids, you find there's remnants of like villages. There's like housing, bakeries, breweries, a lot of stuff that shows that the pyramid builders were really taken care of, and they were not forced labor. And when you look at like the another sign that they didn't use acoustic levitation is that we have lots of graves around Giza of dead workers who like died in like accidents and stuff like that. And studying their bones and stuff like that have shown that, they definitely showed a lot of signs of being having arduous labor, but also had a really high nutritious diet of meat and beer, suggesting that they were very valuable workers. And then I wrote here, beer and pizza for heavy lifting is a universal aspect of the human experience.
That's really, when you need someone to help you move.
The fair is
pizza.
Like, we need you to help us move some boxes, some box-shaped things. Anyways, we'll pay you in beer and pizza, and then like
beer and pizza.
Like, these giant rocks.
Yeah, I'll move it. I'll move these giant rocks for some beer and pizza.
But yeah, like, and there's also like ancient texts and inscriptions that show that there were specialized roles and hierarchies amongst these workers on construction projects, including things like architects, engineers, stonemasons, and carpenters, the kind of things that you need to do these things.
Yeah.
There's no like ancient texts or inscriptions that say they're looking for like sound laser people or like UFO coordinator.
We need a supervisor with a megaphone who can help shout these rocks into place.
No like ancient Egyptian Indeed post looking for a project manager who speaks Martian and has a knowledge of acoustic levitation technology.
Right. Exactly.
But yeah, and so like and then the thing is like this is if you want to push the sad button now. Yeah.
Oh, we're getting to it. All right. Well, we've had fun, but I think it's time for the part where Tristan makes you sad.
So
All
I
right.
think that what we were talking about, the thing that pisses me off when they do this kind of stuff is perfectly
Tell me.
encapsulated in this quote from the episode. When you look at all these ancient structures all over the world, Mayan structures, the pyramids, the Giza temples, you see all these blocks that are not only enormous, it would be impossible to move them around with anything, but even our best technology today. Which is...
Was that a Dave Childress?
That was my
Childress.
I don't know if Childress says that in the episode, but
That was pretty good.
it has it. It's such
is.
a long multi-clause sentence that it feels like his way of how sentences work.
Can I teased this a while ago, this soundbite that I have. It sort of goes hand in hand with this. This is, I would say, we were talking about how, there are myths of people moving these rocks, like how these big stone, sculptures and buildings and structures in general, how they got into place. And there's a lot of myths built around it. Now, I want to play for you the most profound thing I think Georgios Tsoukalos has ever said. I don't think he's wielding that revelation in the right direction, but I do think he is accurate when he says this.
Ancient legends are a bridge to finding what truly happened in our past.
I don't think that's inaccurate to say, but I think he's wielding it in the wrong direction by saying those myths are about alien technology and aliens. Merlin using the staff to move stones of Stonehenge into place is an alien sonic amplifier. When really, I think myths and legends are, they are a way of learning about the past through the context of the cultures and the civilizations and things like that. But I think he's off base with his own conclusions.
Because the thing is, and this is I think the thing that they're key missing and kind of ticks me off is first of all, that claim that sentence speaks a lot because first of all, a lot of the civilizations that in ancient times that did not have written languages, they're missing a lot of key context and understanding that we don't have today because they didn't have anything written down. We don't have that information doesn't exist about how they knew how to do this stuff. But there's outside of just the big sites we've seen around the world, there are large stone structures created in multiple different contexts by multiple different people using different local resources. So there's a lot of evidence that we have figured out how to do this in multiple different ways. So moving big rocks isn't as overwhelmingly complex as you think. And every time when they talk about these kinds of things, referring to the Arab historian or to myths and legends, they don't realize that societies that have writing, like ancient Egypt, for example, did have myths and legends and stuff about spells. But they were also a civilization, which means they had bureaucracies, records, some of the most you can learn a lot about a society from its myths and stories, but you can learn a hell of a lot as well from records of shipments and progress reports and the kinds of stuff that also exist from that period that we used. And for example, when I'm just gonna get the name real quick. When Arab historians like Al-Masudi in the Middle Ages were writing about Egypt, we didn't know hieroglyphics yet. We hadn't translated their language. In modern day, we have, and we have the Egyptians were an incredibly bureaucratic society. And so we have records, we have stuff, but then also at these other sites where there isn't written stuff, we have plenty of garbage and leftover stuff that shows plenty of evidence of how these things were made. And the ancient aliens in this how move big rock thing, which is one of their weakest, has to be on the highest end of the ratio of weakest argument that is most used. Because
100%. And they still use, because when we went to the live show last year, they still spent a big portion of that time talking about moving, how move big rock. And I'm I cannot believe they're still doing this. The thing is, every part of the world, pretty much, we have evidence that people have been able to use, move big rock in order to build things. Machu Picchu, the Angkor Wat, the fucking Wall of China. There's
there's like lots of evidence that humans have figured out very early on how to use, because we're clever creatures that I think we are compulsively driven to build and make things. And so these kinds of things just kind of keep happening. And
but we're struggling. We're struggling with our modern technology. I got to turn that into a soundbite.
We are struggling, that's for sure.
We are struggling. Hey, Giorgio, you're not wrong about that.
But like
one.
the thing is that doing this, because again, this also comes hand in hand with like a heavy dismissing or like, disparaging even of the archaeological discipline and the scientific slow and, methodical progress that, that figures these things out.
Yeah.
And I think in one of these situations where we're like in a state of mass disinformation, misinformation, conspiracy theories, where we've lost like sort of touch with reality, that this is the kind of stuff that eggs that on, that tries to, through bad reporting and selective editing, so distrust of academic authorities, even though these experts become experts because they've dedicated their lives to getting to the bottom of what actually happened. And it's not because they're ignoring your really awesome claims. It's that they don't start with a preconceived conclusion. They follow the evidence where it goes. And so that I think that in many ways, Ancient Aliens, if you want to see it in like the bigger scale, feels to me very much like one of the early signs that like our civilization is like moving away from its like grasp on reality. and specifically, I think like I could almost, I don't know if this will be like a thing that I'll have to like elaborate in future episodes, but I'm kind of getting this idea that like Ancient Aliens, like, premiering in like 2008, which is when a lot of conservatives, especially, which is where the most popular audience with Ancient Aliens, is when they started becoming detached from reality and sort of a backlash against the Obama election. But like, I think the timeline doesn't quite match up with that, because I think Ancient Aliens came out a little bit earlier, but it's phenomenological popularity mixed with the fact that like, I think that like, the war on terror, Iraq war and stuff like that did a massive amount of damage to our trust in institutions that then led us off into like, if you can't trust institutions, you start defaulting to conspiracies and you don't have that sort of disciplined academic approach to things. And a few years in, like, you keep that going for a few decades, and you all of a sudden find yourself in 2024 where there's 1 million dead Americans because we couldn't contain a pandemic. There's Naomi Wolf on Twitter saying that she doesn't believe in fucking clouds. There's people,
Jesus Christ,
just like there's just this like the misinformation gap has just gotten to this absolutely ludicrous level. And I don't know if obviously it's hard to write history about a moment that you're currently living in, but I do think that things like Ancient Aliens in like the 2000s, the late aughts, might be one of those like ways that they're looking at sort of Western culture in this period about when this stuff started becoming more normal. So is that like Ancient Aliens to QAnon pipeline? Well,
we've said it before, belief in one conspiracy theory can just snowball into another, and often does. So, well, thanks for making everyone sad, Tristan. I know that's your job in these end sections, but I thought we had a fun time in this one. This is not the last, I imagine, we'll hear of How Move Big Rock, but that's okay because I have this all queued up now. So that'll be good for us. Until then, how do you move people to follow more of what we do? Well, great question. You can follow us at Probs Not Aliens on Twitter and Blue Sky. Tristan, you do other stuff on the internet. What is that about?
Theoretically, I have a YouTube channel called Step Back where I talk about history and the present and why it's like super important to understand the past to make the present make sense. And also I just talk about conspiracies and misinformation a lot on that channel too. And so you can go to stepbackhistory.com. I think I have that website where you can you could check it out. I think my latest video, which should be up by the time this episode comes out, which is going to be about private equity and why we're moving into this like weird phase where our economy is basically eating itself alive and everybody is going to be a victim of that. Scott, if I wanted to
Hi.
learn how to beat a video game in -2 seconds, how would I do that?
I shaved 2 seconds off of previous world record. That's what that means. But anyway, yeah, I tied a speedrunning world record. Tristan's over here like, I teach you about history and like the world and how to better understand where we are right now. And I'm like, I played a video game and I got a tied speedrun world record.
In times like this, Scott, we need a lot more of that. I feel like we need relief and fun and learning for the sake of learning in this society. So I played Scooby-Doo video game. I love Scooby-Doo. If you're new to this podcast and me, I'm a big fan of Scooby-Doo. That's what a lot of my YouTube channel has been about lately for the past like couple of years. I still talk about comics and superheroes and stuff like that over on my YouTube channel, NerdSync. NERDSYNC. I've got a lot of videos coming out. We're recording all of these podcasts like well in advance, so I have no idea what my next video will be about when you're hearing this. The Harlem Globetrotters video will finally be out.
Harlem Globetrotters video I've been teasing forever. I promise I'll do it this year it might honestly be my big December video at this point. So we shall
11:59 p.m. on December 31st. Now that you've said that, it's going to be like when you're trying to get an essay in before the due date.
Yeah, it's going to be one of those end of the year, like 4-hour long videos that people throw out there before the holidays so that you get a lot of AdSense. That's what I'm going to do. And you can also find this show on Nebula at nebula.tv/probablynotaliens to get episodes early. But you can also get extra bonus stuff if you support us directly over on our new Patreon, patreon.com/probablynotaliens.
Probs not aliens.
Patreon.com/probsnotaliens. That really helps us out. We're trying to make it so we can continue doing this show. It doesn't make any money for us right now as of this recording. And we need to spend time doing all the other stuff that does give us money, but we really want to continue the show. So if you like this show and you want to support us, patreon.com/probsnotaliens for some cool bonus content and just to support us directly if you like the show. But if you don't have any money, no worries. You can leave reviews of this show on whatever podcast platform you are listening on. That really helps us out, as well as telling your friends. If you've already written a review and you're like, I don't know what else to do, tell your friends about it. Tell your friends. Tell your teachers, your professors. I don't know. Tell your weird aunt about it. Yeah, do that. Tell your weird aunt about it. And a great place to send them is probsnotaliens.com. It's got links to everything, everywhere where you can listen to the show and support us, all that great stuff. But until next time, my name is Scott Nicewander.
I'm Tristan Johnson, and the truth is out there. 1, 2, 3.
How do you move it?
Probably. How do you move? How do you? Push it a bunch of times. Just go like, yeah.
How do you move? How do you move it? How do you move it?
There you go. We got to like,
Perfect.
You know how like when you get a song stuck in your head, you have to like just play it a whole bunch of times to just get it out of your system?
Oh, yeah.